My name is Robert Corsini. I am the president of the Pasadena Foothill Chapter of the ACLU of Southern California affiliate. We have a stellar group of organizers who participate with us consistently as volunteers to bring programming such as this to the table. And as many of you already know, that due to the nature of the content and the moment in time that we're facing, has compelled us to move this event to the Zoom environment out of concern for safety for everybody. We're just not in a position to have those kinds of resources in place to put out the security that we would need to make this safe. So with that in mind, I'm just going to quick little introduction to the people who are here, who are on our panel. Tanya Verfield, first, I want to thank her for all of her hard work and diligence, just to incessantly just pounding and making this happen. It's never easy. And of course, I want to thank our team from our chapter. I also want to just say to Norma Rodriguez, thank you so much. Already, our interaction has taught us a lot about the struggle, and all respect to what you do and your commitment. It's amazing. And Reverend Mike Kinman, also formerly from All Saints, is here with us, and that's a fantastic moment to have him here in this conversation. So with that, I'm going to hand this off to Tanya. Tanya Verfield is a chapter board member, and she is an actress and a tireless activist and a mother. And we want to welcome her to this situation. And of course, she's going to lead this entire conversation. Tanya?
Thank you so much, Robert. Many of the thank yous I would have made, Robert just made. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our forum, Is Contraception Next? We are co-sponsored tonight by Planned Parenthood Pasadena and San Gabriel Valley and the LA Progressive. As Robert mentioned, I do want to thank our volunteer chapter board members. They made instrumental contributions to tonight's event. ACLU of Southern California gave us their support, and of course to our esteemed panelists. It's really an honor to be your moderator this evening. I have a lot to learn from you both. As Robert mentioned, and as many of you realize, nothing about tonight has gone as planned. The anti-abortion movement is strong, and their tactics of intimidation, harassment, ever-present threats of violence are working in real time. We have lost panelists because of it. We've had to pivot from in-person to Zoom in deference to safety measures. And I think when this is the opposition's response to what is meant to be an educational evening, we are forced to recognize that the fight for reproductive rights is more imperative than ever. So I really want to thank each of you, although I cannot see you, for spending your time with us here, pivoting with us to this virtual setting, and being together in spirit and in the fight. My hope is that tonight's conversation, as well as the controversy that we had putting on this event, impresses upon all of us the need for our continued efforts to protect bodily autonomy, reproductive choices, and reproductive health in general, including IVF, gender-affirming care, everything else that's caught up in this war to control another person's body. So first, I'm going to do some quick Zoom housekeeping. Settings are such that your mics and cameras are off for the duration of the Zoom. If you would like to just see those of us who are spotlighted, that should be the way your screen is set up. But if for any reason it's not, you can go to the upper right-hand corner where it says View. You can scroll down and click Hide Non-Video Participants, and that should also clear up your screen. For the Q&A portion, which will be beginning later this evening, you can type your questions into the chat, and we will definitely be getting to them after some brief introductions, discussion amongst our panelists, and most importantly, our Q&A with you, the audience. We're really pleased you're here tonight, and we really want to hear from you. So before I introduce our panelists, my name is Tanya Verfield. My pronouns are she, her, aya. I am a former ACLU of Southern California board member. As Robert said, I'm a current board member of our ACLU Pasadena Foothills chapter, and I am an actress, an activist, and a mother. And I was asked to moderate this evening primarily because I'm a woman of color I am of childbearing age, and because I have most definitely needed the resources that we risk losing. So as a teenager, I sought abortion care, which was the only choice for me at the time in Pasadena through Planned Parenthood. And making that decision at that time allowed for the life I have today, which is 2 decades later, becoming mother to a now toddler son. And I hope and pray that my reproductive health care remains accessible in the future, should I want to expand my family or not. I can say that as recently as a month ago, my healthcare provider denied me IUD contraception, citing religious reasons of the medical facility at which he's employed, and he referred me to Planned Parenthood for my care. And I divulged this very personal background just to impress upon you all that these issues do not affect some women or certain women, but in reality, all of those with reproductive organs during the many decades span of time during which they are able to get pregnant. So Norma, one of our panelists tonight, taught me during a previous presentation of hers that the more we shroud these decisions in silence or shame, the more we add to the stigma that these are negative acts. These are things to be not alluded to, rather than acts of practicality or even acts of love, which is how I personally see family planning and bodily autonomy. Sometimes a teenager would need to learn to love themselves before I would have been ready to bring a child into the world and love and nurture them. And as we'll certainly hear tonight, due to current and ongoing systemic injustice, many do not have the resources, the support, or even their basic needs met in order to provide for a child, or they simply choose to not become parents. So tonight we'll look at the changing landscape of legislature, how reproductive health care is being affected right down to contraception, and particularly in marginalized and underserved communities. And, I am shaking as I share all that because of everything we've faced in organizing this event, but I will not give in to what the opposition is trying to use as fear tactics. I will proudly share my story, and I'm very proud to be here tonight. So let's meet our panelists. Norma Rodriguez is Director of Public Affairs at Planned Parenthood Pasadena and San Gabriel Valley. She advances the missions of both Planned Parenthood Pasadena and San Gabriel Valley, as well as Planned Parenthood advocates, so both their 501c3 and C4, by developing and directing strategy for the organization's advocacy, political, and electoral initiatives. Norma has over 15 years of experience managing political outreach and grassroots organizing campaigns throughout LA County. Prior to joining Planned Parenthood, Norma oversaw the public affairs, media, and communication strategies for the California Endowment's 10-year, $1 billion statewide Building Healthy Communities program in underserved communities throughout Southern California. She also managed communication and community outreach strategies for Fortune 500 companies such as SoCalGas, HealthNet, and Frontier Communications. At the Service Employees International Union, Norma worked as a political organizer, field representative, and labor contract negotiator for local and statewide campaigns. Norma earned her bachelor's degree in political science and economics from University of California, Berkeley, go Bears, and master's degrees in both public administration and urban and regional planning from California State University, Northridge. Norma, I'm so grateful you're here with us tonight. And our second panelist, Reverend Mike Kinman, has been an Episcopal priest for 28 years in Missouri and California, and is the immediate past pastor of All Saints Church in Pasadena. He is part of the Global Advisory Council of Thistle Farms, which works with women's justice enterprises around the globe building movements of economic liberation and freedom from violence and sexual abuse. So just from their bios alone, I think we know why we're so honored to have them both with us here tonight. So just to get us started, since you're both here to sort of share from your own personal lens, I would love if you could briefly explain how your background relates to tonight's topic, or what about tonight's topic drew you to join us this evening. Norma, if we can start with you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Norma. As you know, I use she, her pronouns, and I just want to thank you all for taking time to join this Zoom and be in community with us and really learn together about sort of what we're facing, right, in this particular moment in history as we approach really important and what I think is going to be a consequential national election. And so I appreciate you all being here. Quick background, I have always had like an activist protester bone in my body. I was very active on campus and during my undergraduate years. I think what set me on the path of sort of caring and being active around reproductive freedom was an internship I had during my years at Berkeley, working with an activist who was really making a huge impact nationally around marital rape laws, which really only took hold in the 90s. And so she was an activist and she would lobby all across the country. She would lobby legislatures to change marital rape laws. And I had the honor of being an intern with her for a couple years, and I learned a whole lot, not just about the issue, but also about how to be fearless and how to be demanding and how to get in people's faces and hold people accountable. And it really set me on this path of activism. I joined Service Employees International Union initially as an organizer, which was so fun. And I think the perfect job right out of college for me. I did that for some time and then took a bunch of years off to start my family. And I think that also, the fact that I had the luxury of being able to stay home and raise my children, which I recognize was a luxury. Also have the luxury of choosing when and if and with whom, right? All of those things are really kind of part and parcel to what reproductive freedom is. And so eventually I found my way to Planned Parenthood. I've been at Planned Parenthood now for 6.5 years. And every time I introduce myself, I say it's never a dull moment because I came on board in 2018, right when Donald Trump, he was 2 years into his administration, and there was a lot going on. So I had to learn fast. I had to keep up with a bunch of amazing people who work at this organization, and it just really hit the ground running. And thankfully, I love the work. And so even though it's a lot of work, and as you all, I think, helping plan this are realizing it's maybe sometimes dangerous work or risky work. I think the fact that I'm passionate about it and that I love doing it is what keeps me coming to work every day. So.
Thank you, Norma. Well, that really stands out to us just in planning this event and your dedication to being here with us tonight. So thank you again.
Sure.
Mike, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to say, like, I've been involved with Planned Parenthood for a long time. The Pasadena San Gabriel chapter of Planned Parenthood is just astounding. Norma, you, the entire staff there, Sherry, Julian, it is amazing. My family has accessed their services. It is a treasure for Los Angeles. And so just thank you, thank you, thank you. And, it really struck me when you were talking about, the choices you've made for your life, you used the word luxury, and that's really true, and it shouldn't be. It should not be a luxury to make the choice to raise a family, to do those things. And so, and it's that you use language like that, which is the language that you really have to use because that's the reality. It just shows where we are. And so I have to admit, first, when I was asked to be part of this panel, first, it's like ACLU, Planned Parenthood, would you be a part of it? The answer is yes. But I heard the title, my first response was, what? That's bananas. And like, seriously, that's how naive I can be. And I really sort of thought about it. It's like, okay, after everything we've seen, particularly in the past decade, but really throughout history. And again, like I've been working with Planned Parenthood for a while, I was still surprised when I heard there were plans to roll back this right that has existed. Like, I'm 55, it's existed for as long as I can remember. And I never thought a right to contraception was in danger. So I had to do some research, and I discovered what probably everyone else in the room knows, that a universal right to contraception is 52 years old. It's only 10 months older than Roe. There were two different decisions, one for married couples, and then another one said for everyone in 1972. Of course, this is going to be next in the crosshairs. And of course, the charge is being made under the flag of American Christianity and Christian nationalism. And so I'm really here. I guess it's a work of redemption, and it's also a work of what I really believe is reparation. I've gotten to the point where I don't really call myself a Christian anymore, and it's not because I don't follow Jesus. I get into some significant debates with friends of mine about this, but what Western Christianity is and continues to become, in my opinion, has less and less to do with the teachings and life of Jesus of Nazareth. And this ain't recent. This has been going back to the 4th century. And I think it really impacts what we see happening today, because there is power to faith. There is incredible power to faith. The power I find in the life of teachings of Jesus is a power that liberates. It's a power that celebrates. It's a power that says we were beautifully created out of love, out of joy, for joy, and our sexuality is this amazing expression of that. And we were also created to have agency and freedom of choice. And where there's power, there's people who are going to want to use that power for their own and opposite ends, to control instead of liberate, to take away freedoms so that they might try to have more power and wealth for themselves. And that, frankly, is what Western Christianity has done for nearly 16 centuries. And that's what's happening with great force in our nation right now. So, I look at this issue, and I said it's about redemption and reparation. And first of all, it's about redemption, which is kind of about setting the record straight. And I take this really personally as a faith leader. Jesus didn't cozy up to the people on the throne who were trying to enslave the people. Jesus marched into the center of power and stirred up some serious shit. And he overturned tables when they needed to be overturned. He was a revolutionary in every sense of the world, in a world where the government had never existed for all the people, and especially not for women and people living in poverty. That's the Jesus that I believe we need to get back to. We got to stir up some serious shit in this country. Revolutionary shit, because we've lost our way and we're going backwards. And that gets to reparation, and this is important. When people who look like me, who are cisgender white faith leaders, and they claim a version of my faith that, frankly, I can't recognize as being of Jesus at all, and they roll back reproductive rights and threaten to do it again and again and again, it is an act of violence against women and non-binary and transgender people. It is violence against people who have had to and continue to have to endure discrimination, microaggressions, macroaggressions, and trauma upon trauma. So we actually need to go beyond just stemming the tide and guarding the right to contraception. We actually need to go beyond a national guarantee of abortion rights. We definitely need those things. We need to apologize to women and non-binary and transgender people for the trauma and discrimination, trauma that has literally been and continues to be fatal and continues to become more acute. And we need to do more than apologize. We need to center women's leadership. We need to fully fund trauma-informed and trauma-preventing services for women, non-binary, and transgender people. Okay, that's huge. So that's not what tonight is. Tonight, we're really looking at, before we even get to that point, or maybe while we're getting to that point, there is an assault that is brewing. It is already showing up in legislation to take away fundamental health care for women, non-binary, and trans people. And it is being trumpeted by people who do it in the name of Jesus and are trying to take yet one more right, one more piece of critical health care away from women and trans and non-binary people. And we just have to say, it stops right here, right now. And that's why I decided I needed to come here. And thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Mike. I think everyone can hear just from our brief moments with our panelists how passionate everyone is about this. And Mike, you definitely gave like an overview of our whole evening. So I'm gonna kind of go back to your beginning and just elaborate a little bit. As I mentioned to you earlier, and I'll say to everyone in the audience, I really like to start with the lowest common denominator and make sure everyone in the room has the information we have, so you understand where the conversation is coming from. So I really appreciate you being so honest about your reaction to the title of this, because I know that other people can also relate to not realizing that contraception access is at risk. And it should be unconceivable that contraception, which an overwhelming majority of US women, including religious and Republican women, have used and support, and it could one day disappear. So it's not a new fight. Anti-abortion leaders have been laying the groundwork to curtail contraception access and dismantle reproductive health care for decades. So since the overturning of Roe v. Wade in 2022, their tactics have escalated. So as of, in my notes, it's May 2024, but I think this was true as of July 2024, 21 states ban all or some abortion, and contraception is the next target, as we see those attacks being waged on emergency abortion care, IVF, and more. And only a few months ago, the Right to Contraception Act failed due to Republican opposition. And meanwhile, as many as 15 states have created or are strengthening their legal protections regarding contraception care access. Of course, we won't get into the irony that birth control is one of the most reliable ways to reduce the incidence of abortion, but that's a whole other panel. So, speaking of being robbed of personal freedoms, which you mentioned, Mike, I do want to start with a little bit more background of what you were saying and just give some specific examples. So I know that we face opposition from groups such as the Alliance Defending Freedom, ADF. They're a conservative Christian litigation group. They have a string of Supreme Court wins. In 2022, I think their budget was $104 million. And Alan Sears, who's a longtime leader of that group, was quoted. He told the New Yorker that he hoped one day Americans would say the birth control pill is a mistake. And according to Mary Ziegler, a professor at UC Davis School of Law, his comment directly contrasts with ADF's really successful public relations strategy, which is to claim to defend merely the right to conscience of conservative Christians. And so what I would like to start with is maybe some clarity around how these conservative lawmakers are doing away with access to contraception, right? Some of them are arguing that IUDs, emergency birth control, can induce an abortion. That's a defense ADF strongly supports. And then we have other powerful anti-abortion groups like Students for Life. So they take a similar position, suggesting common forms of birth control actually prevent the implantation of a fertilized egg, so they thus qualify as abortion drugs. And right now, it feels like we are at the whim of these fringe conservative groups. And I know, Mike, obviously from what you just said, this is not your personal stance, but I would love your insight into this obsession that the Christian radical right has, wanting to remove completely the right to choose, denying bodily autonomy. I know it's a huge ask, but I would love to know your opinion of like the end game, because maybe that helps us understand why the next target is contraception. What is going on?
Well, the end game, and like I said, this is why I wanted to be clear. This has been going on for 16 centuries. And it is, I mean, and I really want to be clear. There are so many people of deep faith, and that faith is deeply meaningful and transformational in our lives. I'll say our, because I'm one of them. And it is, I don't even have a word for it. But it is, travesty is just like scratching the surface. To use people's faith, to use people's trust in a church, to accomplish an end that is diametrically opposed to, because this is being done in the name of Christianity, and I will say it's diametrically opposed to the best of all the major world religions, as far as I know them. I certainly know Islam and Judaism, very well. and which is to curtail liberty and specifically to control the bodies of women. And seeing women's bodily autonomy and really women's autonomy in general as a threat to an order that they have helped create using the institutionalized power of religion. I think it is so telling that these leaders are using the language of conscience. I mean, you saw this with the Hobby Lobby folks. I mean, this has been going on for a while. That same argument was used in the 1970s, and it was the argument behind the segregation academies in the 1960s and 70s, which were trying to, in the name of religion and in the name of conscience, to continue, despite saying separate and equal, cannot exist, to say, no, we're going to do this, and you can't keep us from segregation. And frankly, it was when the Supreme Court overturned that and said, no, you can't do this, that they turned their sights on abortion, because they realized this was a wedge issue that they could use to motivate people of faith with a really twisted theology that is denying of who we are as human beings, to manipulate the courts and to manipulate public opinion. And, at one level, I got to hand it to them, because politically it's been a brilliant strategy. That we are still in this place 60 years later is a testament, and we need to work just as smart and just as hard, and in fact even more. And so I'm offended by this in many reasons, but one of them is that they are doing this in the name of a faith that A, I hold incredibly dear, and B, that is completely the opposite of this. I spent 30 years basically of my life in the state of Missouri. It was really good to move to California, I got to tell you, and there's wonderful people in Missouri. But like you talked about, legislation that is claiming that birth control pills induce abortions. This almost got outlawed. Contraception almost got outlawed in Missouri. It took a concerted effort from some really phenomenal lawmakers in Missouri. Actually, what happened is there was a bill that was going to widen access to birth control, and Republican lawmakers blocked it by this claim. And now what they're doing is they're using that claim and they're trying to outlaw contraception. And so, we live in a media climate where and this is why gatherings like this are so important. We live in a media climate where if you just repeat the same lie over and over and over and over again, you hope that people either believe it. First of all, you start to believe it yourself. Secondly, you hope others believe it, or that they just sort of go away and give up. And the coordinated campaign of misinformation, and when you add it in the name of the church, you have people who are deeply faithful who say, well, if the church says that, I've trusted the church my whole life, and I want to be a good person. And if the church says this is how I should be a good person, well, maybe I should do this. And they're lying and they're manipulating. This is a problem of giving a microphone to a preacher. I can just go on and on. So I just want to say this is what we have to start doing is calling the bullshit on this. And it needs to be those of us who are people of faith calling the bullshit that people in the name of faith are doing to really, frankly, there's no other word for this, to enslave women, non-binary, and transgender people.
Thank you for your vigilance in this fight. And I'm really grateful for that type of history, because I recognize that the more educated we all are and can speak to these issues with a point of view that is sincere and accurate, the greater chance we have of actually making some forward motion with people who are, as you said, being manipulated by these sources that they respect and revere. So thank you so much. And I think that, that really leads into my next question or topic, which is, we know there's a disproportionate impact on, yes, it is all women, it is non-binary, it is transgender, it's everyone. And there's also this disproportionate impact on women of color. And, you know, just a couple days ago in the news, 28-year-old Amber Nicole Thurman died of a preventable infection after taking pregnancy-ending medication. She suffered a rare complication and was denied a DNC procedure, which would have saved her life. And this tragedy leaves her 6-year-old son motherless. This happened in Georgia. It won't be the last story of abortion bans killing people. It's probably not the first. I don't know, in a world of a lot of media, I don't know how much media coverage we get of everything that's really happening. And, you know, maternal mortality in the US is increasing, most notably in American Indian, Alaska Native, Black women. It is considered preventable. So the idea that there's a disproportionate impact on women of color is abundantly clear to me. And Norma, I think I would ask you first probably how you see structural racism, economic inequality intersecting with abortion, contraception restrictions, and disproportionately impacting these women of color, and also what you see in the work you do specifically in relation to this disparity. I'd love to hear about that.
Well, that's a big question. It is, I mean, where to start, right? It's there obviously is an intersection around the disproportionate impact that a lack of access to abortion or contraception has on low-income women of color or people of color, just in general, right? It's not just women who seek out reproductive care. And so I think that the main way, right, is access. You could technically have the right to an abortion, but if you cannot access that abortion, then do you really have a right to that abortion? Same with contraception. And so if we kind of start or begin with that premise that access is sort of the key to being able to act upon your right to bodily autonomy, then by kind of default, it's like a self-selected group. Low income people of color will lack the right in any kind of tangible, actionable way. And I think one of the first ways that I saw it when I first came on to Planned Parenthood was the fight around the Title X program. So the Title X program is a federally funded program that helps low-income people of color access reproductive health care and contraception. It is obviously not used for abortion care because that is, there's no federal money that's used for abortions. However, many people who are on Medicare and access public health care benefit from Title X, including patients served by Planned Parenthood. And so during the Trump administration, his administration enacted a gag rule where doctors who are caring for patients, Title X patients, could not even utter the word abortion as an option to their pregnancy. And so they couldn't mention abortion. They certainly couldn't refer out for abortion care to a third-party provider. And it really caused a lot of turmoil, obviously, among abortion providers and providers of contraception and other reproductive health care. So much so that Planned Parenthood actually opted out of that federal program because there was no way that our providers were going to lie to patients or even lie through omission by not explaining the whole range of their options when it came to a pregnancy. And so that was really palpable to me because we were seeing the impact on low-income people that Planned Parenthood serves, right? Planned Parenthood is a safety net provider. Over 80% of our patients do not have insurance. They come to us not just for their reproductive health care. Many come for primary care in a lot of ways, right? We catch if you have high blood pressure. We catch if you have diabetes when patients are coming in. And so it's really this really complex role that Planned Parenthood has in the greater healthcare system, which is a whole other conversation. But in terms of Title X, it was really obvious that the people who were going to suffer because of this gag rule were the low-income, vulnerable people who already have so many barriers to accessing not just healthcare, but everything else, right, in their lives. And so it was a big fight. In the end, you know, we did a lot of advocacy work against the gag rule. And as soon as the new administration came in 2020, that gag rule was lifted and Title X was kind of back, at least for providers like Planned Parenthood. Other providers, you know, did not opt out of the program. Much of that funding also was funneled into crisis pregnancy centers, which we know are places where people seeking reproductive care or abortion, or I'm sorry, pregnancy care are often lied to and misled about what their options are. And they think they're talking to a medical professional, but they're really talking to just Joe Schmo who, you know, has an opinion about why you're pregnant. So anyway, the Title X program is really a key federal program that provides access to contraception. And depending on the outcome of the next election, it could again be in the crosshairs of, you know, cuts and attacks to access, not just to abortion, but also contraception. And so it is just really, and I think also another thing, Tanya, like back to when your introduction, when you were sharing your personal story about, you know, being denied an IUD or being denied contraception because of your doctor or the hospital that you were at is religiously affiliated, and they decided, you know, no, you can't get an IUD. It's really like that lack of access or that lack of insurance or having a choice on who your insurer is another way that I think low-income people of color are impacted. Many of the insurance providers in California are religiously affiliated. Catholic hospitals or religious hospitals own a lot of the hospitals throughout the state, and they abide by certain rules. And there's many healthcare deserts where we don't even have primary care or hospitals that are willing to, you know, take patients without insurance or Medi-Cal patients who tend to be low income, people of color. And so just the number of ways that a poor person or a poor person of color is going to be impacted is kind of endless. I think they are probably the first populations to feel the impact of bans, to feel the impact of barriers, to feel the impact of the erosion of services. And that's kind of what, at least on the C4 side, that's part of my job, is really that policy and legislative activism and advocacy.
Thank you so much, Norma. Yeah, oh, Mike, please go ahead.
No. What were you going to say? Please say what you're going to say first.
I was just going to say that in researching to prepare for tonight's panel, that was just what kept coming up, that basically marginalized, underserved communities are being kept marginalized and underserved. And so as we talk about the impact on reproductive healthcare and reproductive access and now contraception access, yes, we're all getting hit, but then these communities are getting hit harder because they always are. And that is part of how we contribute, not we personally, hopefully, but as a country, really keep these systemic barriers in place and keep income inequality in place. And these people are on a rat race trying to get ahead, and they can't ever because they're stuck without all these resources and getting even more resources pulled away right now. And it was just so disheartening in all the research to see that that's literally what's happening. And Norma, you mentioned, the healthcare that Planned Parenthood provides. I mean, they do the most basic things: wellness exams, life-saving cervical breast cancer screenings, STD, HIV testing. I mean, they do so much. And yet we see that they're constantly attacked for being the pro-abortion, organization. So there's just so many layers. And then she closed it off by bringing it back to you, Mike, that it's, we're stuck in this in what the religious right is doing. So what were you going to say, Mike? I'd love to
Well,
hear.
right. So a couple things. First of all, just again, Norma, just thank you, thank you, thank you. I just want to just keep saying thank you. And a few things. So this agenda that is being pushed, it's not only misogynistic, it's classist and it's white supremacist. And we need to name that, because when you look at that, that encompasses, like, we got the numbers if we name that. This is a wonderfully diverse country in terms of gender identity, in terms of social location, social class, and in terms of race, ethnicity, and color. And I believe the majority of us celebrate that. And so a couple of things. First of all, we talked about race-related healthcare disparities. And I think it's important to be really specific about this. Black pregnant women in the US are 3 to 4 times more likely to die during childbirth, That makes contraception a matter of life and death. And don't think people who are trying to outlaw this don't know that. It is a matter of life and death. I want to put a really quick plug in. There's an amazing young filmmaker coming out of St. Louis. Her name is Brittany Farrell. I actually met her in Ferguson. She's making a movie now called "You Lucky You Got a Mama." There's a great organization called WMM, Women Make Movies, and it really is just sort of a visual love letter that affirms the stories and lived experiences of Black women and trans non-binary birthing people. Who are trying to just survive pregnancy, but then also with their kids survive the first year of life. And I'll put a link to it in the chat. But it really it brings to life these incredible disparities that exist. I said I lived in Missouri for 30 years. Grateful to be in California. Do you know how many Planned Parenthood clinics are left in the state of Missouri, a state that has banned abortion? 1. It is in St. Louis, which means that, like, if you are living in rural Missouri, if you're living in Columbia, or if you're living in Jeff City, or living in Kansas City, you do not have access to the critical health care that Planned Parenthood provides. And so what I encourage, like, we're going to get to sort of what do we do about this. I'm going to tell you something that everyone can do about this. First of all, write a check to Planned Parenthood of Pasadena and San Gabriel Valley. Support your local Planned Parenthood. The second thing is, look for a state that has banned abortion and make a monthly gift to the Planned Parenthood chapter there, because they are trying to do impossible work right now. And they are serving these populations of primarily, in many cases, Black and brown and economically disadvantaged people. And they are doing it against a tide. Like, if you haven't lived in one of these states, and particularly in a rural place in one of these states, you do not know the uphill battle that is being fought. And there are literally women, trans, and non-binary people who are dying, as you started off with this. So I'm just saying, like, one of the things that we can do is write those checks, support not only our local Planned Parenthood, but do the research, find a state like Missouri where there's only one Planned Parenthood clinic, and make sure that that clinic gets supported, and support Planned Parenthood of Missouri in expanding that care.
I want to jump in for a brief
Please.
statement as well. And I would encourage you all, if you are inclined to support financially, I would encourage you to contribute to abortion funds.
We're going to get there.
Yes.
There's one, California's abortion fund is called Access Reproductive Justice.
Yes.
Access RJ. They are the groups that are on the ground, finding people who need abortion care and figuring out all the logistics about how do we get you, to the nearest health center? How do we make sure you have a place to stay? Do you need? Thank you, Mike, for putting that in the chat. They are really the people who are on the ground. Yes, Planned Parenthood has a role to play in this whole ecosystem. But if you want sort of to make a very direct and important impact on people seeking abortion care, or emergency contraception, then those are the folks to give money to. At least that's what I do.
Absolutely, Norma.
Me too. Absolutely.
Yes. And for the audience, we are going to talk more about both of those organizations and because we want you to leave here feeling empowered and feeling hopeful and feeling that there is something you can do to have an impact. So thank you for getting us there. Before we go much further, because I do want to hear more about, I really want to address California and other states and how we can support them, like you've both mentioned. I want to quickly touch on legislation for people who are wondering where exactly things are at the moment. So I don't know about everyone else, but I constantly hear that there is bipartisan support of resources for reproductive care, that's actually what the people want. And Planned Parenthood sources say that 8 in 10 Americans believe that decisions about abortion should be between a patient and their doctor, not politicians. And, what we see is there's like a political playbook, right, for attacking birth control. And it's very similar to the playbook for attacking abortion. That's why abortion is coming up so much in tonight's panel about contraceptive access. So there's a slow, steady chipping away of rights and access, right? And both of their efforts rely on these measures, right? Like we're slashing funding for low-income patients, or we're enacting parental consent laws to restrict minors having access. And like you mentioned, Mike, we're empowering these ideologically supportive lawmakers and judges who are pushing these friendly legal frameworks, right? So the attack on birth control has actually been really closely guarded by rhetoric. I was reading a bunch of articles where they just sort of say, oh, don't worry about that. That's not under attack. We're just about abortion, and they're really denying that this is the next target, but the results of what they're doing are going to be very real. So I look to both of you to inform me and our audience tonight. What is next as we're trying to thwart this nationwide abortion ban that's on the table, and we're trying to safeguard access to reproductive health care? What are we up against, legislatively speaking, so that people sort of understand where things are at?
Sure, I can start there.
Yeah, please.
I want to just to this group make it abundantly clear that contraception is next. It's already sort of happening throughout the country. There's sort of, I think right now there's 8 states that just this year in 2024 have kind of been chipping away and introducing legislation, and they amend it or it gets held, but they're working on it. And I witnessed this kind of skepticism as well around whether or not Roe would be overturned, because it's precedent. It's a Supreme Court decision. They're not going to go there. And there was just disbelief and shock when it actually happened. And I think maybe if you're sort of in this space and working on these issues, it feels abundantly clear, or it did to me back then, that, yeah, of course they're going to overturn Roe. Like, that is literally what they're doing, and they're working on it, and they're going to do it. And then they did it. And the same for contraception. There is a bigger plan here. There's a bigger goal, which is really control, right? It's controlling people. And like Mike said, it is rooted in white supremacy. It's rooted in patriarchy. And that's what I'm going to say about that. But in terms of legislation, here in California, we, especially since the fall of Roe 2 years ago, but even before that, every year there is sort of, at least from Planned Parenthood, a docket of bills that comes out, policy priorities that turn into bills that we then lobby at the state capitol every single year. And the bills are always with the aim of protecting and expanding access, not just to abortion, but to contraception and other types of reproductive health care. And so in California, we are like in this bubble in a way, because legislatively, it is a strong state legislatively. There's lots of protections, there's lots of layers of access. There's always room for improvement because California does have healthcare deserts and abortion deserts, but you know, comparatively or relative to other states, we are kind of a haven state of access. And so there is a lot of legislative and advocacy, legislative work happening to expand and protect access. Last year, I think it was, or when was Prop 1? Yeah, 2022, November 2022, we passed Proposition 1, which was a constitutional amendment to guarantee the right to abortion and contraception in California state constitution. And so that was a victory. And then we saw sort of a wave of constitutional amendments, you know, kind of go across the country in red states like Kansas and, you know, Missouri and all of these states that we thought, or people thought would, that are red anti-abortion states, actually did end up passing these constitutional amendments and codifying it in their state constitutions. And so all this to say, if and when a new administration comes in, if it's an unfavorable result in the election, it will not matter that all of these states have passed constitutional amendments to abortion and contraception, because if there is a national abortion ban, then a state constitution will not supersede or trump a federal law. And so California is very much at risk, right? There are national implications to the results of this election, even here in California. And so there is a lot of work to do. I think in here we have moved even past just access to abortion and contraception. Now there's a lot of bills. I know, especially this year, we're really working on kind of strengthening our security and making sure that through the legislative process, we can guarantee health center safety and the safety of our providers and the safety of our patients. Just through, like, this year, there was a bill that hopefully is going to get signed by Governor Newsom around permitting and allowing health centers to open without so much red tape. Like in Fontana, we're seeing the city of Fontana really create barriers at the local level around code enforcement and so they're trying to prevent a health center opening in Fontana. And so the fight in California, to me, feels important in terms of like the legislative priorities, but it really is now operating at a higher level than simply trying to get access, because access does exist here. It's just there's a lot of other things that kind of come into play around access, and being able to open a health center so folks can come in and get care is one of those ways. So did I answer that question?
Absolutely. Mike, what did you want to say? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, first of all, just amen to everything that Norma just said. I think the other thing, not the other thing, another thing is we need to learn from the long game that our opponents played for the last 50 years. And what we're being tempted into right now is a game of putting all of our resources into kind of a game of whack-a-mole. Oh, they're going after this. We've got to defend that. And we do need to do that, but we're smart people. We can do more than one thing at a time. What the right did incredibly effectively, while we were looking the other way in many cases, and Jane Meyer wrote a great book about this called Dark Money about 8 years ago, is they funded incredibly effectively on the local level candidates for state legislatures, which determined the electoral maps. They funded candidates for the judiciary. They funded education in universities to, they did conservative think tanks to produce conservative judges that have gotten us to this point. So they have spent the last 40 years, 50 years, building a conservative infrastructure of people in power. And Charles and David Koch were two of the primary funders of this to get us to where we are today. If it were just, I mean, that's why we have the Supreme Court justices we have, is because they built from the bottom up. Well, yeah, we need to do all these things that we're talking about, and we need to be just as smart. They were able to get conservative judges on the bench because there is very little information when we elect judges. Most of us don't know who we're electing. A lot of times when we elect people on the local level to state legislatures, we don't know who we're electing. And yet we have the opportunity to do a couple things. First of all, to vet these candidates, to figure out which ones are going to roll back these things and then actually put in place progressive policies. And we can do that not just where we are in California, we can do that nationally. And we can go into red states and we can help fund and phone bank for and write postcards for candidates that are going to build on the state and local level a network that will get us where we need to be. And then the other thing, I just want to put a plug in for this with the judges, is if you see a public defender running for judge, vote for them. Because I think 98% of the public defenders that I know, and there's a few of them who've run for judges and some of them have won, they are people who have dedicated their lives to serving the most marginalized people, the people the law is supposed to defend. And so if you do nothing else, when you see someone and on the ballot, it doesn't say prosecutor, because we love to run prosecutors for judges, who run on their conviction record of mostly how many poor people have they convicted. If you see public defender, give money to that campaign and vote for it. But we need to be just as smart, in fact, even smarter with the long game, while we're doing the important critical work right now.
Thank you both so much. And I mean, you've addressed so many of the things that I wanted to say. And, I think probably a lot of people logged on tonight thinking, oh, yes, this is problematic, but we're safe here in California. So I really appreciate you clarifying, Norma, what is actually at stake right now and what it feels impossible to work at an adequate speed to keep up with these rights they're trying to rip away that we've already fought for. You mentioned playing whack-a-mole, right? This is what marginalized communities are constantly being forced to play. It's why they don't have a chance to get ahead. And of course, it all comes back to money and capitalism. And that is what will always win at the end of the day from my 40 years experience on the planet. That seems to be what's in charge. So, thank you. You both have already named a lot of, thank you. That is true. Not if we fight back. Both of you have named a lot of action steps that people can take. And, I really do want to hear more about Abortion Fund, because I think that that is probably one of our strongest, as you mentioned, Norma, that's one of our key ways that we can fight this. I know for me personally, I'm one of those people where I'm like, well, I don't have a lot of money to give, but I would drive across multiple states to pick someone up and bring them here and help them, so I want to hear more about the work that they're doing. And I know we can contribute financially, of course, and thank you for putting that link in, Mike, about access, reproductive justice. I just want to hear from you, Norma, a little bit more about Abortion Fund and how, just in what ways can the common person who does not have a lot of money, how can we support these causes that are really, it feels to me like one of the only action steps that I can truly take. Of course, educating myself, Mike, that was a great point and well taken here, that we need to vet our candidates and vote accordingly and have that long game in mind. But can you just talk a little bit more about the Abortion Fund, Norma, so people leave here really feeling they have a sense of understanding of it?
Sure. It is sort of the premier abortion fund here in California. There are abortion funds all throughout the country. So if this is something that really speaks to you in terms of how you can support, how you can make a difference around abortion access, then just Google abortion funds across the country, and you'll get names. But here in California, they are really the kind of the workhorse in terms of meeting people where they're at, getting, referrals from different organizations, or somehow people find their way to them through word of mouth or through connections. And so it's really amazing work. They're an amazing group of people doing that day in, day out. Another organization that I've worked with before is called Plan C. They actually provide emergency contraception. And they are also another really, really great group here in California, working around these issues of access and really supporting low-income people seeking either abortion care or emergency contraception. They do a lot of education, around misconceptions about what emergency contraception is, how to access it, how to take it, and really connecting folks with either emergency contraception or abortion pills, and doing self-managed abortions. And so they're all amazing groups that really do need support, financial support, to stay afloat and be able to continue to provide the services that they provide to people and reach people where they're at. So yeah,
Those are great, Norma. Thank you. And I know we're very good in our chapter about sending out resources after the fact. So everyone who's on here tonight, I know we'll be making a list of the organizations we've talked about so that you can make your appropriate investments into them. And that really brings it full circle, talking about education, right? Plan C is an organization that educates, because that's really what we came here to do. And one of the other ways I think that we possibly overlook, but also just like organizing for tonight and facing these threats and possible cancellation and people not feeling comfortable being on the panel, we are facing such opposition and these really undermining tactics, these fear tactics. And one of the most basic ways I think we can support is, like you said, Mike, about being, this white man religious leader, and you being the one to step up and say, this is untrue, what we're propagating here. I saw a young blonde white woman. She was probably in her 20s, and she had a necklace around her neck that said abortion. And I literally said to her, I was like, that is a great necklace. What happens when you wear that? And she said she wears it every day, and that people approach her and go, well, why are you wearing that? And she just says, I want to talk about it, and on the most basic level, her doing that. And I asked her very privately, I said, do you mind if I ask you if you've ever had, she said, no. And I said, great, I'm glad you wear that, because someone like me might not feel comfortable wearing that, but someone like you can wear that, and you can talk about it, and you can educate other people on what it means and what access to it means. And so anyway, just to say that, on a basic level, just having an evening like this with two incredible people like you, and getting this information out there, and hoping that our audience tonight shares what they learned tonight with other people, I think is another thing. Mike, do you want to say something? And then I think we can
Yeah.
the Q&A.
So just really to jump off what you've said, is locally here, both Planned Parenthood and Access Reproductive Justice have phenomenal speakers who, if you belong to a faith community, they will come to your faith community. I know we had them come to All Saints Church. They will come and speak. And so you don't just have to remember what you heard here tonight. You can use these resources to educate. And like, if everyone here thought about, what are the community organizations that I'm a part of? And how can I invite organizations like Access Reproductive Justice and Planned Parenthood to come and support, to educate from the we have so many different community platforms. And again, we need to be so smart about getting the real information out there. And we're just so blessed here in California that there's amazing people who, like, their job is to come to your congregation, is to come to your meeting and do this. And they can't wait to do it. And so please know that those out there. And again, the two best that I've found here are Access Reproductive Justice and Planned Parenthood in this region. And there's also many, many others. So I would encourage people to do that.
Thank you so much, Mike. And before we transition to Q&A, and please, everyone feel free to write questions in the chat. We would love to hear from you. Just a reminder to everyone that the ACLU that helped organize tonight is also heavily engaged in the fight for reproductive freedom. And so when people donate to ACLU, they're also helping to support strategic litigation, advocacy, organizing to take on this fight. So that is one other option of somewhere to donate that can make a difference. And so I'm going to look for questions in the chat, and I'm really, really honored to be learning from both of you tonight. So thank you again, both, for being here and sharing your vast knowledge with us. Going to see if we have questions. I feel like we covered a lot, so people may be well educated at this point, but we will see. Is there anything either of you feel that we sort of jumped over or sped through that you want to go back to? I'm more than open to anything you want to expand on.
I mean, I want to echo something that you said, Tanya, which is, so when the Dobbs decision was handed down, and at the time I was at All Saints Church, and I called Juliana Serrano, who works at Planned Parenthood. She used to work for us at All Saints. Juliana's amazing. And we have a banner out in front of the church. The church has a banner. And I said, what's the message that Planned Parenthood would have us put on this banner at this point? And Juliana was really clear. She said, abortion is healthcare. And that message is so important. And I think, and when we talk about abortion, it's actually why I think and I'm really hesitant to say this. I don't think there's a gift. There is an opportunity that we have with contraception being put in the crosshairs next. And it's because for most of Americans, contraception is part of our daily life. It has been normalized. And if we can use this to say, look, all of it's healthcare, because we need to normalize abortion as healthcare, because and it's what you named with the woman who had the abortion necklace. It has been and continues to be so stigmatized. And if we can actually use this opportunity for the attack on contraception to say, look, this is normal healthcare. We've been using it, I'm 55. I've been using it most of my life. This is like, and it's something that men and women, like, we, non-binary, trans, we all use contraception, or many of us do. If we can use that as a way to normalize talking about reproductive health care, including abortion, as just, this is healthcare for human beings. And not like, what I love about that necklace is, don't be afraid to say the word abortion. And when you're talking about the right to abortion, don't just talk about the extreme cases. Don't just say, oh, this is someone whose life was in danger or they couldn't afford to. No, this is someone who wanted to exercise their right to choose to not have a child. And it doesn't need to be anything more than that. And I think this is the everyday thing that we can do in conversation, is just talk about it and normalize it. And again, debunk frankly, the religious information machine that has been out there, really misogynistically stigmatizing women for making a healthcare choice.
I think to add to that, you were really talking about stigma, Mike, right? And how pervasive and how, it's so ingrained in us that we don't even see it. When we talk about abortion, it is always a hush word. It is secret. It is shrouded in shame. 1 in 4 people of reproductive age will have an abortion in their lifetime. It is so common. We all know someone who's had an abortion. Abortion is healthcare. It is normal. It is part of a person's life. It happens. It's real. And yet it is so stigmatized that, and we see stigma kind of reflected in legislation, right? That seeks to ban it or blame issue blame. I mean, it's really horrible. And so part of the work that we really focused on at Planned Parenthood in the last couple of years has really been destigmatizing, dismantling stigma around abortion. We have an awesome training. I'm happy to share a link that it's super interactive and fun, and you can really like gauge your understanding of abortion and even catch yourself. I mean, even I like sometimes use stigmatizing language, and it's a learning process.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike. Yeah.
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah.
And so, well, it's like I had a vasectomy.
Yeah.
And no one's trying to outlaw that.
Nope.
And I mean, like literally, what the fuck is
Yeah.
what, like, I mean, just literally, it's like, if you need any more evidence that the motivation behind this is to control women, no one is trying to no one is stigmatizing my vasectomy or trying to outlaw that I had one.
And I'll share a personal story. My mom had her kids super young. She immigrated from Mexico. She was a teenage mom. She had me when she was 17. By the time she was 20 or 21, she was done having her kids, and she had 5 kids. And so she was, when my brother was born, she asked for her tubes to be tied. And the doctor was like, no. So they refused, even though she knew she was done having children. They said, no, right? I'm sure no one told you no, Mike, right? You can't have a vasectomy.
Oh, no. Oh my God.
And so she was told no, and she accepted that and accepted an IUD instead. But I'm like, when she was telling me that story, I said, what do you mean they said no? She's like, yeah, they didn't want to, they refused. And that was so wild to me, that someone else made the decision for her on the spot, and she had no choice. She just walked out of there and didn't get what she wanted for herself. And then the IUD failed, and then my other brother was born. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, and again, and so like Shakespeare says, past is prologue. Knowing the history of these movements. And if you go back in history, not the same people who are alive today, but maybe some of them, the roots of this movement are people who practiced forced sterilization on women of color.
California has a history of forced sterilization.
Right. And so was actually, forcing the procedure that she was denied was by the same sort of historical roots forced on women. And if you don't think, that's my same sort of thing of like, holy, oh my gosh, is contraception next? I've learned that if we pick a point in history and think we can't go back there, be careful. Because what we're showing is there is no shame in this group of people, and they'll go back as far as they can. I mean, that when you think about Make America Great Again, the America that they're talking about wasn't great for a heck of a lot of people. And that's, that's like the New Jerusalem for them. And we've got to, and it's going to imprison them too. And we've just got to fight against it.
I want to just respond briefly, and then I'll get to some questions that came up in the chat. And Norma, like you said, this is like your area of expertise. I'm sure I've been speaking in draft all night here and said many wrong things, just learning as I go and doing the best I can. But I think what's important is that we're trying to have this conversation, and we're showing people it's okay, speak in draft, make a mistake, and together we'll grow. And I want to say what you talked about, Norma, about really educating people on what abortion is, I think is so important. It's one of the reasons, one of many, why I'm so infuriated about the 28-year-old woman in Georgia, because she had already taken the pill that she needed to end her pregnancy. And what she needed was a DNC procedure. And I have a million friends who've had a miscarriage and needed a DNC. And to think that, like you said, abortion is healthcare, a DNC is healthcare to be denied that and to die because of it is just,
So
it's,
can you educate me? I don't know what a DNC procedure is. Can you say what that
Norma,
is?
do you want to say it in more detail? Because I know.
So they, so I'm not an expert. I'm not a healthcare provider.
Right.
So I want to make sure that I'm being as accurate as I possibly can. When someone does a self-managed abortion, and it's a two-step process. You take mifepristone, which actually stops the hormones, like the pregnancy hormones, from continuing. So you essentially end the pregnancy. And then you take misoprostol, which is the medicine that actually initiates contractions to evacuate the uterus. And you can do this at home. You can do it safely. More than half of all abortions in this country are done through medication abortion. It's very, very safe. Each medicine on its own is very safe. And actually, as a little bit of a tangent, mifepristone is currently making its way through the courts, a decision or a case challenging the use of mifepristone in self-managed abortions. They were essentially suing the FDA for approving mifepristone. Made it up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court kicked it back to the lower courts because the people who brought the case in the first place didn't have standing. I think it was a political move because they didn't want to issue this ruling in an election year, but that's a whole other conversation. So, so a DNC is basically clearing out of the uterus. If the mifepristone doesn't fully evacuate the uterus of the fetal tissue, then you need to go in and actually get a DNC. However, like to Tanya's point, anyone who experiences a miscarriage would need that kind of care as well. And so I don't know all the details about this case. I actually haven't heard too much about it. I saw the headline today and I kind of perused it. But yeah, somebody did lose their life because they became septic. I think there was an infection from not having access to care and having, the procedure done. And so it's real. I mean, I'm sure that it's not the first time that it's happened, either because someone, was denied or they simply couldn't get, to a health center or couldn't get to a doctor. Another alarming, I think, trend that we're seeing is that doctors are leaving certain states because they don't want to jeopardize their license. They don't want to face imprisonment and fines. It's a really politically and kind of scary environment for a lot of doctors to practice medicine, specifically OBGYNs. And so now there's there's a lack of primary care in so many areas of the country, and now seeing kind of an exodus of OBGYNs, and we're seeing maternity wards across the country also close. So it feels super dangerous for women or anyone who can reproduce. It's a complicated, lots of moving parts, but everything is kind of coming out of this decision, right, that Roe has unraveled and has really exposed so many awful things that, are now kind of coming to bear. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Well, and I want to say thank you for educating me. And this is like for any other men who are out there, like we need to educate ourselves because, one of the things that's happened over the last 50 years in this country is our maternal mortality rate has gone down, particularly among white people, but it's gone down. And that's a good thing. But it's gotten to the point where it is easy for, people like me to think, oh, you get pregnant, you have a baby. Maternal mortality is still a thing. The risk of even in the best of situations, there is a risk of injury or death in childbirth. And when you attack contraception, what you are doing is exposing women to a potentially life-threatening condition against their will. And we need to start talking about it that way because the people who are doing this are sentimentalizing it in terms of family. And like, oh, everyone wants a baby and stuff like that. And we can get into the whole sort of like, you care about this child until it's born. But, we need to recognize that, despite everything that we have, and as you said, there are areas of the country right now where doctors, for their own life and livelihood, are fleeing. And so maternal mortality is going to go up in those areas. That, this is exposing women to a potentially life-threatening condition against their will.
Absolutely. And that is exactly, at least from the articles I read, what happened with Amber in Georgia, that her doctors were feeling their hands were tied. They were legally not able to help her, and they let her wait 20 hours while her infection spread. And it's true. Like, if she had access to contraceptive care, possibly, wouldn't be in that position. So let me get to a couple of our questions in the chat. This is from Sharon, and she said, opposition to abortion has become so associated with evangelical Christians that it seems like that's the way it was all along, but it hasn't. In fact, the Southern Baptist Convention, they actually passed resolutions in 1971, 1974, and 1976 after Roe v. Wade, affirming the idea that women should have access to abortion. Can Mike speak to that?
Yeah. And what happened was Jerry Falwell and the Moral Majority, who were losing their tax benefits for their segregation academies, and they wanted to find a political way to get people into office who would preserve basically their finances and their ability to have segregated schools. And so they discovered that they could, taking a religious tack on abortion, they could motivate people to go to the polls and elect conservative candidates that would protect the tax benefits for their churches and allow them to use things like talking about conscience to not provide health care to female employees, to not recognize LGBTQ persons, and to perpetuate segregation. And so that's what happened. And this is well documented.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. That is crystal clear. Vinny wants to know, can we discuss the Hyde Amendment and why Democrats have failed to repeal it even when they were in control of both houses? Norma, is that something you can speak to? And should we explain what the Hyde Amendment is? I can give the sentence that was written about it so we can explain one, or do you want to explain it, Norma?
Oh, that Hyde Amendment is it's a federal, I guess it's a provision or a law that basically prevents federal funds from being used in abortion care. And it is the question that I think Vinny poses is maybe the $1 million question, right? We could also ask why Democrats, when they had the House and Senate and under Obama's administration, didn't just pass a federal law making abortion a federal right. So that answer, I can't answer. I don't know. I don't know why Democrats haven't repealed it. But I do know that the Hyde Amendment is one of those kind of things that we were talking about when it comes to barriers, and that barriers that disproportionately affect people of color, low-income people seeking reproductive health care, including abortion. The Hyde Amendment is actually part and parcel to Title X, which I talked about earlier. Title X provides cancer screenings and contraception and all kinds of reproductive health care except abortion because of the Hyde Amendment. And so many people who are on Medicaid, any kind of public health care, receiving any kind of subsidy or anything like that from the government are disproportionately impacted because abortion is not available to them due to that federal provision. So
the Hyde Amendment will be repealed when we destigmatize abortion. It has not been repealed because even people who want to repeal it, because there is such a stigma about abortion, they will not take the political risk. When we destigmatize abortion and just say, this is healthcare, like going to your doctor for anything, that's when we'll have a chance to repeal the Hyde Amendment.
Yeah. And that brings me to really wanting to, maybe I've done it many times already, but thank you both for being willing to be here and putting yourselves on the line to express these, not points of view, but this vital information that is lacking. Truth that is not available. It is not available. It is not to be found. I had to research tons of articles to find information that was accurate and actually taught me something. And it shouldn't be that way. It should be abortion is healthcare. This is what's happening. Everybody needs it, you know? And I just really want to thank you, because there was a lot of fear and a lot of potential threat to being here tonight. And it sounds to me like the most vital thing is that not be the case anymore, that this be an open conversation that is clarifying and clear to everyone what is at stake and what needs to be done. And I'm just really grateful to you both for being willing to put yourselves here at this time and this place. Well, and Dick has a question. I've only read it very briefly, so let's see if we can all follow along. Assuming there's been research along these lines, is there an understanding about why some young white men are so rabidly anti-abortion?
I guess if that's going to be in anyone's wheelhouse, it might be mine. Although Norma, I'm not young anymore. So I think what it's hard to fault people for having a winning strategy, but I'm going to fault them anyway. What this movement has been able to do, and it's historically been a really effective strategy, is to take people who are used to incredible privilege and convince them that equality equals loss. And so this is what white men are being trained, is that, well, we're under attack, we're an oppressed minority, all these things are happening to us. And the truth is, no, it's not. We're trying to make this a more equitable society where healthcare is available to everyone. And instead, what is being threatened is white supremacy and male supremacy. And it's being pitched as being equated to us as white men losing something. When it's not. It's just saying, look, all the stuff that you've had all along, you can go get a vasectomy and no one cares. All we're saying is everyone should have that, but it's being pitched as, well, men are going to lose power. You're going to lose power if this happens. Instead of saying, no, you're going to have the joy of being a part of a movement of liberation. You know, I have a great friend, Gail Fisher Stewart, who just said she's just amazed that when we talk to so many white folks about race, that we choose to go to the place of shame instead of realizing that we have the ability to claim an identity as abolitionists. And, you know, one of the things I was taught by just the amazing sort of Black queer activists in Ferguson is the more privilege you have and the higher your social location, the greater your responsibility to literally put your body between the most marginalized people and the people who would hurt them. And so we have to, I'm going to flip that question on its head, which is for, you know, white men like us, young, old, and in between. It's not just stop doing that. It is, we actually have the responsibility and the opportunity to use our privilege to dismantle it. And to say, you know, we actually this needs to stop being classified as a women's issue. We need to talk about this as a human issue. And those of us with the most power and privilege in society need to be the ones to say, look, we're putting our bodies on the line for this. You know, to me, it's just, I mean, I thank you for what you said, but it just is like, God, have we gotten to the point where going on a Zoom call is being called courageous? But I recognize that, like, yes, it is probably not so much for me, but other people are more, you know, for more at risk. And what that means is we have to even put ourselves out there even more. And those of us with the most security need to lead the way. Okay, I'm gonna stop preaching.
I wanted to I had a thought, Mike, when you started answering. And I would submit that it isn't that you're, as a privileged white man, you're losing anything. It's what, to me, what it feels like right now is that white people are seeing other people gain something. White people aren't actually losing anything.
No, we're not losing a thing.
But you're watching transgender people have some visibility. You're having, gay people be able to be themselves out in public. And that feels like watching somebody else gain it's an affront. Not that you're losing anything, you just, not you personally, but you know what I mean? Like,
No, yeah.
It's just, and so I think it's more nuanced than just feeling like you're losing something, you're losing power.
Absolutely.
There's something about watching somebody else gain that doesn't look like you, that you don't think deserves it or is entitled to it the way you are. That I think is
Amen. You said it so perfectly.
That was very powerful, and I couldn't agree with you both more that is very nuanced and very much what's happening. And it is something I consistently tell my white male friends. I'm a broken record with them, that when they say to me, "Hey, I really liked what you posted," I'm like, "You post it, you talk about it. Like, don't thank me for posting it. You go do it. You go talk to 5 of your white male friends about it right now." And it makes me want to get an abortion necklace, because why shouldn't I wear that and let somebody
I should wear one.
And yeah, we should all. Okay, so everyone in the audience will be
Abortion Network feels
sending
like
you a link
and
here.
You get one, and you get one.
Okay, so we did get one other question, which again, I've barely read, so I'll read it aloud and we can process together. And then we'll probably wrap up soon. Thank you both for your time. Hillary Clinton, while running for president, often stated that one of her goals as president would be to ensure that abortion would remain safe, legal, and rare. In fact, for the past 2 decades, the incidence of abortion has been decreasing significantly. How was this progress miscommunicated to the Christian nationalists?
How is it miscommunicated to the Christian nationalists? That it's become, I don't think it was miscommunicated. I think it was never about that. It was about, how do we control women? And frankly, I think the whole language, I get the language of, what was it? Safe, whatever, and rare.
Legal and rare.
Safe,
That's also
legal,
rooted
and rare.
in stigma, by the way.
Right. I've used that language before, and I've learned not to use it because exactly, it's rooted in stigma.
Yeah.
There's like, what other medical, like, no one talks about vasectomies being safe, legal, and rare. And it just is like, no, they need to be safe and legal, like every other healthcare procedure. And the thing is, the key, like, the goal was never to reduce abortions. The goal was to elect conservative lawmakers who could promote a broad-based conservative social and economic agenda, which includes the control of women and women's bodies. And so I would say it wasn't miscommunicated, it just didn't matter. So, Norma, what do you think?
I agree.
We have one question, and then I just want to speak to someone wrote to me in the chat that they're, rightly disappointed that one of the speakers who would have had expertise regarding the particular jeopardy that Black families are in isn't here with us. And I just want to say that I'm very sorry as well. And I respected everyone's decisions, whether they felt comfortable being here tonight or not. And I do not have the statistics that she has readily available, but I will do my best to get some resources from her so that we can send that out to the audience here tonight as well, so that we can also have some information around that. I'm very sorry that we don't have someone here sharing with us, but I will do my best. And I think this would be a great final question. Maybe we can end on a positive note. I don't know if we can do that. Let's see. But what is the status of abortion rights and reproductive justice elsewhere in the world?
Well, Mexico legalized abortion last year. So I I don't know. I think I don't have a great global perspective. I do know that there is federal funding that kind of, it's global federal funding for reproductive health care and contraception. The US government funds a lot of those programs. Under the Trump administration, that came to a screeching halt. Biden came in and started those programs up again. And so, yeah, I think it varies. I think Poland outlawed it. You know, we're seeing sort of a wave. I think just globally, there's kind of this really kind of scary right-wing push with really like authoritarian governments and strongmen kind of being in power or holding on to power. But globally, I don't know, I can't share like an expert perspective
So,
on
Norma,
that.
is the global gag rule is still in effect, right?
Not anymore. It
Oh,
was
good. Okay, so that's key.
Yeah, that's key. Where a lot of that funding that I talked about that the US government kind of gives to certain countries around the world to expand reproductive health care, pregnancy care, contraception. There was a gag rule, a global gag rule under the Trump administration when the gag rule around Title X was in place here in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Well, and just to note, Project 2025 wants an even stronger global gag rule. And what a global gag rule is if you receive U.S. government aid, you can't even talk about abortion.
Can't talk about abortion.
Any NGO that does that can't even talk about abortion as an option. And it doesn't prevent abortions. It raises the level of unsafe abortions and fatal abortions. So it actually doesn't even work to prevent abortions. And again, that's not the goal.
Right.
Yeah, that's not the goal. I think that's
if it was the goal, they would be
was
expanding access to contraception.
right.
Not
Exactly.
the other way around.
Exactly.
No, they're like, I mean, this whole movement against contraception is really revelatory about what this is really about.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you both so much for being here. I think that we hopefully had an impact on tonight's audience. I know I was greatly educated by our conversation, and I think this is, one of those moments where we want this huge audience for something like this, and people do not realize that this affects everybody. We have also just pointed this and said, this is for women, this is it. And really, we are all affected by this. And I think that is so important. And the more that people understand that, the greater impact we can have when we have these conversations. So again, I just want to thank you both so much for being here, and to everyone who logged in to join us. And that is all I have. We will be sending out all of these resources and recommendations, book recommendations, places to donate, anything that we've discussed tonight, we will be sure to send out. And I can't thank you both enough, Norma and Mike, for being here.